Imagine yourself as a schoolboy from Pyongyang. It is a cold morning, the kind where the city looks grayer and more desperate than usual. Your uniform is neat, your bag is packed. Before you leave, your mother ties the red scarf of the Korean Children's Union around your neck, a small piece of bright fabric reminding everyone that this child has already entered the state's political system. You walk to school past slogans of revolutionary zeal and drab socialist building blocks. Arrived in the classroom, the leaders are already there. Not in person, of course, but in portraits, watching from the wall with the calm authority of men who have never had to take an exam. Soon, the school day begins. But before mathematics and Korean grammar, everyone bows, collectively and sincerely, to the leaders and expresses their deepest gratitude. Being born in Pyongyang already makes you more privileged than many children elsewhere in North Korea. The capital is the showcase, the polished window display of the system. But even here, schooling is never just about education. In the Kimdom, the classroom is not only meant to produce capable students or encourage individual development. It is about producing loyal citizens, ensuring everyone is ideologically reliable and politically safe. North Korea proudly boasts one of the longest and most comprehensive mandatory education systems in the world. Officially, every child receives 12 years of free compulsory education, from kindergarten all the way through senior high. The regime presents this as one of its great socialist achievements, often proudly celebrated alongside free healthcare and free housing. In theory, it sounds beautiful. No tuition and no child is left behind. But in reality, as free as it sounds, the entire DPRK education system is not designed to educate, but to indoctrinate, sort, and control its citizens. Yes, the state does not charge tuition, but the schools also have no heat. The textbooks are falling apart, passed down until the pages literally disintegrate. Teachers, officially honored as builders of the nation's future, often face low pay and are pushed into side work, farming, trading, or relying on parents for support. Parents may still be expected to contribute money, materials, labor, or gifts, because even in a socialist paradise, the classroom somehow still needs someone to pay for the coal and the broom. Then, a large part of the curriculum is dedicated not to critical thinking, but to a distorted political history. Children are taught the revolutionary past of the Kim family, the benevolence of the leaders, the cruelty of foreign imperialist enemies, and the sacred duty of loyalty. In this episode, we investigate North Korea's compulsory education system, where students learn to read, but also what not to read. The country exists because the leaders saved it. The people suffer because enemies attack it. The future is bright because the party says so. Perhaps the only thing that it teaches us is, sometimes, free is the most expensive thing of all. Before we dive into the absurd theatre of North Korean schools, let's take a moment to thank our channel members. Your support is what allows us to keep peeling back the layers of propaganda and looking at the raw, unfiltered reality of life inside the world's most isolated state. You help us to alleviate our financial burdens and keep our channel running. Thank you, sincerely. Now, buckle up, let's dig in.
The universal 12-year compulsory education is in force in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. A law on enforcing the universal 12-year compulsory education was adopted at the 6th session of the 12th Supreme People's Assembly of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, held in September 101 or 2012.
To understand the education system today, we'd better rewind a little bit and look at the beginning. In the early formative years, the regime's priority was, surprisingly, not to brainwash the citizens, but to modernize the system first. The new regime had to erase Japanese colonial influence, teach Korean literacy, train administrators, produce technicians, and build a socialist identity almost from scratch. The regime first poured resources into an elite track for the revolutionary families. They created a pretty particular thing called the Revolutionary School, with a clear aim of taking care of and educating the children of anti-Japanese partisans who had died in the liberation struggle. The state organized committees to search for these children across Korea and abroad, assess their eligibility, build facilities, and select teachers from the best of the best. Over time, admission expanded to children of Korean War casualties and children of agents sent to the South. But in the early 60s, these schools gradually turned into training bases for the reproduction of political and military elites. In other words, they were the boarding schools for revolutionary bloodlines. The most famous ones are the Mangyongdae Revolutionary School for Boys and the Kangpan-sok Revolutionary School for Girls, both founded in 1947. They admitted children between the ages of 5 and 9 and offered a 9-year program inside a highly disciplined environment where schooling, military preparation, and political loyalty were fused together. Many graduates went on to enter the army, the party, and the state apparatus. It was a pipeline for a new ruling class, one that could claim not only education, but sacred revolutionary inheritance. But revolutionary pedigree was not the only path upward. For bright students outside these special bloodline institutions, higher education offered another route into the elite. If you're smart enough and your political background is acceptable, then university could become the ladder into the professional and administrative class. This was where the regime's need for ideological loyalty met its need for actual competence. Nobody can run a modern state with slogans alone, but needs engineers, doctors, and all other sorts of scientists. So, Kim Il-sung University was established as the pioneer of the country's higher education. The university's own official history says preparations began in 1945, with a preparatory committee organized in May 1946, with 7 faculties, including literature, law, science, engineering, agronomy, medicine, and railway engineering. The statement should be taken with caution, since it's the official DPRK narrative. It nonetheless shows that the new country urgently needed an institution to train the people who actually do the hard work. By 1948, several faculties were separated from Kim Il-sung University to form specialized colleges. The engineering faculties became Pyongyang College of Industry, the origin of today's Kim Il-sung University of Technology. The medical faculty became Pyongyang College of Medicine, later Pyongyang Medical University. The agronomy faculty became Wonsan College of Agriculture, later Wonsan Agricultural University. The regime essentially built a higher education system around the practical needs of a planned economy: industry, transport, medicine, agriculture, and governmental administration. In any country, teachers shape the next generation. In North Korea, they were also expected to serve as minor priests of the revolution, teaching children not only how to read, but how to read the world correctly. The state began training teachers to educate the masses. The Pyongyang Teacher Training College opened in 1946 and later developed into Kim Hyong-jik University of Education. The First Supreme People's Assembly in September 1949 already proposed the law on implementing the universal compulsory primary education system, but the coming Korean War disrupted the plan. With a sizable force of trained educators, North Korea implemented compulsory primary education in 1956 on the post-war wreckage. Then, the October 1958 article on enforcing the universal compulsory secondary education system and preparing for implementing the technical compulsory education system introduced the free compulsory secondary education and enforced the policy nationwide the next month. In 1967, the system expanded into a 9-year technical education model that combined general schooling with basic technical and productive training. The next leap came in 1972, when the great leader introduced universal 11-year compulsory education. That's 1 year of kindergarten plus 10 years of primary and secondary schooling. So, early DPRK education had a clear logic. Kim Il-sung University trained the country's talents. Specialized colleges trained the technical cadres. Revolutionary schools reproduced the political and military elite. Teacher colleges mass-produced those who would carry this entire system downward into ordinary classrooms. It was a complete educational pyramid. At the top were cadres, officers, commanders, engineers, and doctors. At the bottom were millions of children who attended compulsory schools to be made literate and disciplined. If we stop the story here, early DPRK education looks perfectly normal for a new post-colonial state trying to establish itself. It was honestly impressive that a poor socialist state claimed to be one of the longest compulsory education systems in the world. Then, something quietly went wrong. At the 14th plenary meeting of the 5th Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea on September 5, 1977, the leader presented his masterpiece, Theses on Socialist Education, where he famously said, "Political and ideological education is the most important part of socialist education, and that scientific, technological, and physical education should be built on sound political and ideological education." Oops, the wolf had come out of the sheep's clothing. Education is never just about transferring knowledge, but quietly decides what kind of person the state wants to produce. A liberal system, at least in theory, equips individuals with critical minds, and students may grow up to have their own idea of democracy and civil disobedience. North Korea, like all other communist states, had no interest in that little luxury. The regime needed capable people, yes, but only capable people who remained obedient and loyal. For decades, this model stayed basically intact, even during the 90s deadly famine. The schools just solicited more financial support from the families if there is an economic hardship. North Korea kept presenting education as one of the proudest achievements of socialism, but quietly operated the brainwashing machine. Finally, here comes North Korea's greatest educational update. In September 2012, North Korea's Supreme People's Assembly approved universal 12-year compulsory education. The system would be free for children aged 5 to 17 and would consist of 1 year of preschool, 5 years of primary school, 3 years of junior middle school, and 3 years of senior middle school. That's a very 21st century socialist upgrade by our supreme leader. On paper, it looks like a neat structure. 1 year to prepare the child, 5 years to build the foundation, 6 more years to shape the future worker, soldier, scientist, or loyal office holder. It sounds modern, organized, and almost reassuring. But structure only tells us where the child sits and never reveals what happens to the child once the classroom door closes. So instead of admiring the socialist education system, let's follow it from below and consider the curriculum and students' actual experience.
This is the Bamboo Kindergarten in the city of Siniju, affiliated to the Siniju Teachers Training College in the border city at the northwestern end of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. It is more than 70 years after this kindergarten was established. In those days, the kindergarten took the special and first places on more than 60 occasions at the national contests of kindergarten children with distinguished talents and art festivals.
In the Kimdom, the brainwashing begins early. Primary school is considered too late. The indoctrination starts at the moment when babies start to walk and talk. In the official propaganda, the state takes loving care of every infant, allowing mothers to contribute to the socialist revolution without the burden of childcare. The defector Bella remembered that every aspect of her North Korean life was warped by indoctrination. She says, "In kindergarten, we learned heroic tales about Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. National holidays were celebrated with special snacks distributed by the government. There were portraits of the Kims prominently displayed in our home that I cleaned every morning to a wake-up song praising the regime." This is precisely how the system was designed. It's a socialist paradise, so adults were not supposed to remain at home, living private little lives outside the production plan. Men worked, women worked, everyone worked. The promotion of women's participation in the workforce was only possible through state-run nurseries and kindergartens. In 1976, North Korea adopted the Law on Nursing and Upbringing of Children, which placed childcare under the responsibility of the state and society. Then, conveniently, the indoctrination begins. The kindergarten preparation class starts around age 3, where children are expected to recognize the faces of revolutionary heroes like Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-suk, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un. Before everything, they are taught how to behave before portraits and how to greet the painted marshal with gratitude. On major national holidays, such as the Day of the Sun or the Day of the Shining Star, kindergartens are required to put on elaborate musical and theatrical performances. That's when you see those tiny, heavily rouged North Korean children playing accordions or singing with unnerving, robotic precision. The parents are busy surviving, so there are no other choices but to let their kids receive the state's daycare and loyalty training. The kindergarten experience is relatively short and painless. Soon, the kid has to move on, finish the one-year preschool, and enroll in a local primary school. The first thing those young students, or maybe the parents, realize and come to terms with is disassociating textbooks. It sounds ridiculous, but true that, if you live in a rural community, the most basic tool of education, the textbook, is out of supplies since the collapse of the state distribution system in the 90s, and the government has been largely unable to print and distribute new textbooks to the provinces. Students are forced to use hand-me-downs that have been passed through a few generations of socialist learners. The paper quality produced in North Korea is notoriously terrible as well, so the books literally disintegrate after 2 or 3 years of use. When a new school year begins, the teacher stands at the front of the classroom with a stack of these decaying books. Who gets the cleanest, most intact copies? The children of powerful party officials or wealthy merchants. The poorer students receive the worst copies, with pages missing or covered in the scribbles of previous owners. The poorest students receive nothing at all. Maybe they can hand copy from some classmates, or the parents can go hunting for leftovers in the local black market. Daily NK reported in 2018 that one school in South Hamgyong province received only 15 to 20 math textbooks for classes of 30 to 35 students, and only around 10 textbooks for English. In some places, only about 60% of students received their textbooks. So the first lesson of North Korean primary education is not about grammar or arithmetic. It is about scarcity management. Before a child learns division, he already understands that one textbook divided by 3 students equals socialism. Another report in 2025 said schools in the city of Anju demanded 6 kilograms of scrap paper if a student lost a textbook, or 3 kilograms if the book was badly damaged. Parents complained that this was absurd because many had already paid for the books at the beginning of the semester, since free education doesn't mean free textbooks. But apparently, powerless poor families have no way to challenge the Juche reality. With or without proper textbooks, the courses now come. The Supreme Leader revised the curriculum immediately after inheriting the throne in 2013 and made English and information technology compulsory from primary school onward. So now, the mandatory subjects include various ordinary academic fields: Korean language, mathematics, natural science, English, Korean history, Korean geography, information technology, and other standard school subjects such as music, art, and PE. So yes, there is real education. The child does learn reading, basic science, and now even IT. North Korea wants children physically clever enough to serve the modern state, and politically retarded enough to raise no questions. North Korean school curricula, therefore, include 4 special subjects for idolizing the Kim Il-sung family. The 4 special subjects are the revolutionary activities of Kim Il-sung, the revolutionary activities of Kim Jong-il, the revolutionary activities of Kim Jong-suk, and a strange-sounding course called socialist morality. Technically, these are not history courses, but more like North Korean hagiographies and theology. Children start from the basics, like Kim Il-sung is the founding savior of the nation and the benevolent protector of children. Kim Jong-suk, Kim Il-sung's wife and Kim Jong-il's mother, is the anti-Japanese heroine and the sacred womb of the Kim dynasty. Kim Jong-il is the defender of socialism and the one who protected the country in hardship. Then, the students learn about why their lives are extensions of the leadership's benevolence and do the philosophical mental exercise of explaining why hereditary dictatorship is best for the Korean people. Once everyone grasps the essence of Kim worship, they must know how to implement their gratitude toward the leader in their real lives. Myung-hee Lee, a professor at Michigan State University, has examined 32 North Korean socialist moral textbooks and found that these textbooks deliver 4 core messages from the state. The Kim family is sacred, socialism is righteous, the nation is pure, and the individual belongs to the collective. Children thus learn to act as members of the greater collective, love the country, respect teachers and parents, follow school rules, value group life, hate imperialists, obey the party, and behave like the smallest unit of the never-ending revolution. Traditionally, North Korean primary education has relied heavily on the homeroom teacher model. One teacher guides the same class through most of its school life, teaching many subjects and managing discipline, behavior, and class activities. But young Marshall's ambitious education reform made some surprisingly modernizing progress. Some primary schools have introduced teachers, especially for English and information technology, as the old teachers were not trained for the modern curriculum. This becomes especially obvious with English, which is taught in the upper years of primary school, mainly 4th and 5th grade, since 2013. The textbooks and curriculum now teach about pronunciation, daily expressions, and repeated oral practice. Sounds quite modern, doesn't it? The only minor problem is that modern English education requires teachers who actually know English. In many ordinary schools outside Pyongyang, there is no English specialist at all, let alone school teachers. So, in the end, the English teacher may be the same overworked homeroom teacher who also handles Korean, math, classroom management, political study, cleaning duty, and whatever else the revolution requires that week. Recently, Russian has returned with excellent timing. In late 2025, Russian official Alexander Kozlov said that North Korea had made Russian a compulsory subject from 4th grade. It was quite a shocking move that actually fits the broader trend of deepening North Korea-Russia ties. Moscow needs friends, Pyongyang needs resources, and suddenly the Cyrillic alphabet has become a very promising career skill for the Korean kids. But again, it's highly doubtful whether they really have capable teachers or not. The brainwashing does not stop with the school subjects. Primary school is also where children enter the routines of political organization. The Korean Children's Union, with its red scarf and public rituals, turns school life into a miniature version of a loyalty test. Every child is a part of the greater collective, watched by teachers and classmates. It means showing the correct attitude, joining group activities, taking part in meetings, accepting criticism, and learning to criticize oneself before anyone else does it more professionally. In other countries, group activities might teach teamwork. In the Kimdom, group activities also train your political sensitivity. You'd better not badmouth the teacher or the leader, otherwise some cohorts are bound to snitch. There will be additional ideological drills and morning political studies, so you'd better grow your ideological habits fast. So, by the end of primary school, congratulations on learning the basic grammar of life in the Kimdom. The leader is always benevolent. The party is always correct. The collective comes before the individual. Enemies are everywhere. With the first emotional reflexes of loyalty, it's time to move on.
Successes are made in the educational sector of the DPRK. The Munsubong Junior Middle School in Dongdaeun District is putting efforts into the collective discussion to actively find out and introduce teaching methods suited to the age and mental qualities of the junior middle school children, bringing about successes in education.
Middle school is where North Korean education starts to ask about the direction of everyone's life. What kind of human material is this student going to become? If you came with privileges, say your dad is a factory manager and your mum works at the local women's union, you'd likely enter the elite track and be prepared for universities or military academies. If you are a mathematics genius, the state may invest in you through specialized schools and later train you for science, engineering, or even the cyber units that help the country acquire foreign currency in the most creative ways possible. But for the vast majority, middle school is not a golden road to Kim Il-sung University. It is preparation for ordinary usefulness, factory assignments, farm labor, military service, or technical work. A South Korean government-linked report, Understanding North Korea 2023, describes junior middle school as having regular classes, extracurricular learning, children's union activities, and physical education, with political ideology, mathematics, science, and English treated as especially important. More or less, junior middle school life resembles primary education. Mathematics becomes more serious. Science shifts from simple observation to low-budget or no-budget experimentation. If you're in Pyongyang, English is taught more heavily, with a more diverse vocabulary and more listening and speaking activities. At the same time, the ideological studies intensify alongside the academic curriculum. The middle school lessons go beyond simple revolutionary facts, and you must demonstrate your own patriotism beyond textbook examples. The student is not trained to ask, "Do I agree or disagree with the state?" The question is, how do I demonstrate that I agree with the state and obey the party's direction? For instance, middle school is when self-criticism enters your life. Zhong Guang-il, a defector who grew up in the Kimdom, remembers these sessions vividly. Every Saturday, the teacher would lead self-criticism sessions, where each student was expected to discuss his or her failings over the past week, and to point out the shortcomings of another student, Zhong recalled. If you couldn't find a reason to criticize a peer, that meant you'd failed again. The psychological pressure is immense. You're wrong not because you did anything particularly wrong, but because the system says you're wrong. To demonstrate your loyalty, you are encouraged to report on your classmates, neighbors, and anyone who expresses even the slightest doubt about the regime, even your own parents. The fear of being reported is so pervasive that genuine political discussion or any classroom freedom is impossible. Then there is labor, the most physical part of middle school life. North Korean education treats labor not as a disruption, but as part of socialist formation. In theory, productive labor teaches discipline, collectivism, and respect for work. But in practice, it is the best way to let the state squeeze value from you without any payment. A Seoul-based NGO reported that North Korean students are forced into agricultural labor, item collection, and construction work through the education system. Agricultural support can include sowing, weeding, rice planting, transplanting, and harvesting. So, average middle schoolers may be sent to collective farms for 30 to 40 days in the middle of the semester. It's very educational, assuming the lesson is spinal endurance. Another recent report from South Hwanghae Province says primary, middle school, and university students were mobilized for rice transplanting, with work running the entire day from early morning to evening. If you failed to participate, schools demanded money in return. So, middle school is not just preparing students for the future national production, but sometimes borrows their labor in the present. Years pass by, and senior middle school will be more differentiated. The broad natural science of junior high splits into separate fields like physics, chemistry, and biology. The Korean course goes deeper into the field of literature. Newer senior-level subjects include areas such as current party policies, psychology and logic, and Chinese characters. The students stopped repeating primary school propaganda in a taller chair, but are tasked to write policy analyses themselves. The academic ladder is real. It just happens to be bolted to the party wall. If the state chose the academic path for you, the senior middle school curriculum is surprisingly heavy. Besides the conventional workload, you also need to learn about industrial or agricultural basics and participate in some military training. Just imagine it: advanced sciences, foreign languages, technical skills, military activities, plus political sessions, youth league activities, labor mobilization, examinations, and vacation assignments. You are being fully trained for the future takeover of your socialist country. This is also the stage where career anxiety becomes serious. For the lucky and politically clean, senior middle school can be the gate to university. But that gate is narrow and guarded. University admission depends not only on preparatory exam scores, but also on family background and routine reviews of ideological fitness. Parents know perfectly well that the children of officials and wealthy families have advantages, especially for Pyongyang area universities. In other words, your grade matters. But having a good grade while having the right parents matters more. For ordinary students, senior middle school can feel less like choosing a future and more like waiting for an assignment. You do whatever you can, and in the end, you have to follow the order. A recent report claimed that after failures in a new specialization track exam, party officials warned that students who failed to meet required standards could be forcibly assigned to coal mines or construction sites. Please take these warnings seriously, because in the Kimdom, education is not only a ladder upward, but also a sorting machine downward. If you're lucky enough, in terms of the family you were born into, you might attend an elite school like the famous Pyongyang No. 1 Middle School. Here, every single piece of teaching equipment, from the desks and chairs to the electronic musical instruments and sports gear, was imported directly from Japan and China. They were the kinds of gears that make Kim Il-sung University jealous. Here, the students are divided into two distinct groups. The first group is the local Pyongyang elite. The vast majority are the children of Central Party officials, military generals, and wealthy merchants, who are not required to take any entrance exam. They are granted direct admission to the primary school and are automatically promoted through the middle school level. The second group is the recruited talent, known as the Pyon Ip Seng, also known as transfer students. These are the absolute top students recruited from the provincial first middle schools across the country. To join the Pyongyang No. 1, they must pass a grueling 2-round entrance exam. Only about the top 5 students from each province make the cut. These young talents comprise roughly 30% of the student body at Pyongyang No. 1, but they are the ones who produce the vast majority of the country's academic achievements, like winning international math Olympiads, dominating programming contests, and becoming the regime's top researchers and cyber warriors. Considering the student body, the Pyongyang No. 1's 100% university admission rate seems very reasonable. Kim Il-sung University allocates 80 to 90 recommendation slots exclusively to Pyongyang No. 1, compared to only 5 to 9 slots for an entire provincial first middle school. Pyongyang Medical University gives them 20 to 30 slots, while giving other schools only 1 or 2. The internal ranking exam at Pyongyang No. 1 is essentially a formality. Even the student who finishes dead last in their class is guaranteed admission to a first-tier university. It is a meritocracy through the filter of bloodline, residence, money, and political trust. The middle school quietly ranks children according to their usefulness. The most privileged are protected. The most talented are harvested. The ordinary majority is prepared for the places the state actually needs labor.
The 8th Congress of the Workers' Party of Korea stressed the need to vigorously push forward with the work of making all the people well-versed in science and technology. Making all the people well-versed in science and technology is the Workers' Party of Korea's strategy of training talented personnel. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea has adopted a law on online education in order to contribute to making all the people well-versed in science and technology by establishing a well-organized online education system and order.
Now comes the funniest part of North Korean education. It is said to be free. The state presents this as one of socialism's proudest achievements. No tuition, no capitalist cruelty. No poor child is locked out of the classroom because his parents cannot pay. Kind of moving, isn't it? Every student should be smiling, and nobody asks who bought the blackboard and chalk. In reality, when the kid enters the schoolyard, The first thing that the parents learn is that nothing is free. In the Kimdom, education is free in the narrowest possible bureaucratic sense. It's a language game about manipulating the definitions of tuition and free. Sure, there is no formal tuition invoice labeled capitalist surcharge, but almost everything around education still costs money, labor, connections, or all three. Since the 90s humanitarian catastrophe, the education system has been slowly pushed out of state supply. The lunch, textbook, heating fuel, classroom repairs, and teachers' livelihoods, all these things were supposed to belong to the state's loving care. But the state's loving care has a habit of arriving late, empty-handed, and asking the parents to contribute. For very young children, this begins even before primary school. Daily NK reported in 2024 that many families in Hyesan could not afford to send children to nurseries or kindergartens because parents were expected to pay for almost everything. Otherwise, the kindergartens can provide nothing. Another report from Chongjin said kindergarten teachers, struggling to feed themselves, had been taking portions from children's lunchboxes. Prior to the pandemic, some kindergarten teachers reportedly survived on occasional 10-day rations and parental gifts. But when rations stopped and parents became poorer, the kindergarten lunchbox turned into a small battlefield of hunger and resentment. Eventually, regular kindergartens require parents to provide everything from lunch bento to toilet paper, and many families are now less willing to send children at all because even free kindergarten costs too much. In a brutal Korean winter, the situation becomes dire. The state does not provide coal or firewood to heat the provincial schools. Middle schoolers are mature enough for the task of gathering wood for winter, but how about kindergarten and primary school? Consequently, many parents now choose not to send their children to kindergarten at all during the winter months. Why send your 5-year-old to sit in a freezing, unheated room to learn nothing of value when their grandparents are sitting at home anyway? Schools in Hyesan reportedly demanded students contribute firewood or cash to prepare classrooms for winter, and later reported that some schools even suspended classes for a week so students could collect firewood in rural areas. Maybe we should feel awe about North Korea's most advanced education system, where bad weather becomes part of the curriculum. Children study science, language, and morality anywhere around the globe. But here, students learn from physical labor and get trained in survival skills at a young age. Students suffer, and teachers are not better. In the propaganda, they are builders of the future, noble mentors shaping the young revolutionary mind. In reality, many teachers are left unpaid and cannot even secure their own food. A 2025 qualitative study on North Korean elementary education claims that parents became financially responsible for school resources and staff salaries, while teachers remained under strict ideological control and had no autonomy. In other words, the teacher is expected to be a professional educator, political instructor, class manager, moral guardian, attendance officer, and revolutionary role model, while not necessarily receiving any paycheck from the state to feed her family. In 2024, it reported that teachers in Hamhung were increasingly asking students' parents for rice, money, or any valuable items. Several teachers were criticized by school officials for requesting parental help, but one teacher reportedly protested that she was a mother and wife first, and if she could not earn anything, her family would starve. Another teacher said hunger takes precedence over everything. That's right. The teachers should be treated as formal state employees, not criminals who solicit bribes to survive. That is a reality of socialist education. The teacher must teach loyalty to the state, while asking parents to help her survive the state's neglect. The parental financial support quietly changes the relationship between teachers and students. The classroom becomes unequal very quickly. Children from better-off families receive more attention, better treatment, and sometimes better access to materials. Poor families cannot contribute as much, so their children risk embarrassment, neglect, or exclusion from activities. Conversely, some parents are worried about which homeroom teacher their children get, and even judge teachers by their living standards because they believe the teacher's conditions affect the child's future. This also makes sense. In a system where the state fails to support teachers, the teacher's household economy decides their teaching abilities and job priorities. Nowadays, the burden keeps expanding. Recently, schools in South Pyongan province were pressing parents to fund building repairs, libraries, science labs, computer labs, sports fields, and teaching materials during a so-called Month of Assisting Schools. At the same time, North Korea's law on education support, adopted in 2023 and revised in 2025, formalized the expectation that institutions, enterprises, and citizens should support education financially, with penalties for non-compliance with the school's order. So what exactly is free? The tuition may be free. The slogans and propaganda posters are absolutely free. The leader's emotional support should be free, I guess. But the books, repairs, uniforms, heating, lunches, supplies, teacher support, and school campaigns all cost something. Sometimes the cost is money. Sometimes it is firewood or scrap paper. Sometimes it is a teacher's dignity. Sometimes it is the children missing class because the state or the family needs their labor. It's not a joke. A 2025 report says that teachers were being blamed for poor attendance, even though students were absent because families were barely surviving. The government owns the promise. Parents pay the bill. Teachers are stressed. Children can only pray for a full portion lunch. So yes, education is free in North Korea, but the actual classroom costs a little bit more. The North Korean education system, from the empty nurseries to the graduation ceremonies, is a masterclass in authoritarian control disguised as socialist generosity. The free label is the regime's most effective and enduring propaganda tool. It allows the state to claim moral superiority on the global stage, boasting of its 12-year compulsory system, while simultaneously delivering an education that serves only one purpose: the perpetuation of the Kim dynasty. In the end, the state owns the slogan, the family receives the invoice. But the real cost of this education is not measured in won, rice, scrap paper, firewood, or the occasional voluntary physical contribution to the country. The deeper cost is intellectual and emotional. North Korean children are taught to read, but also what not to read. They are taught history, but only after history has been domesticated into family mythology. They are taught morality, which practically means loyalty. They are taught gratitude toward the leader before they are old enough to understand what has been taken from them. The system not only punishes wrong thoughts, but tries to prevent them from forming in the first place. Before a child can compare North Korea to the outside world has already been explained as hostile and corrupt. The teacher has taught him that hardship is noble, and it's the struggle for a brighter tomorrow. Before anyone complains about the broken textbooks, the students have been indoctrinated to be grateful for whatever they have. The real tragedy is that the state has replaced freedom and individual development with usefulness and loyalty. Curiosity is allowed only when it points in the approved direction. Intelligence is rewarded only when it is politically safe. The country harvests talents and assigns them to be the replaceable parts of the socialist machine. By the end of secondary education, the student has processed to be a safe citizen of the People's Republic. For many, the next destination is military service, factory work, farm labour, or a construction site. The college gate only opens for the lucky few, the wealthy, the well-connected, and the exceptionally gifted. It raises a new set of questions. How does one enter a North Korean university? Is the exam really about merit, or does political power lie quietly beneath the answer sheet? Can people buy a college entrance? How much does loyalty matter? Can a brilliant provincial student rise through the system, or must he compete against the children of officials who were born halfway up the ladder? And once he gets that university degree, does it actually change his fate in the Kimdom, or simply assign him to a more elegant cage? That, comrades, is a story for next time.